Anna Solana, from the host of the Pump Fiction podcast from token.com. I'm here with Jan from Hathor Network. Jan, please introduce yourself.
Hey, thank you, Anna. I'm Jan Martens. I'm a CEO of Hathor Labs and also one of the co-founders.
Amazing. So if you could give us a brief rundown of your project in under a minute, like an elevator pitch, what would you say?
Yeah, Hathor Labs is the main developer and support of Hathor Network, and Hathor Network is a layer 1 blockchain, which we started back in 2018. The mainnet was launched in January 2020, so it's over 4 years now. And the idea is to be our slogan is blockchain made easy. So the idea is that you have a blockchain that's more user friendly, not only for the end users, but also for the developers, the people actually creating the products on top of the networks. Because what we found out back in 2018, I think it's even true nowadays, even after that many years, is that blockchain is still very, very complex, and that brings not only the costs, they're higher, but also the security risks. So we're trying to do a product, a layer 1 that's easier to use, so you remove a lot of these complexities and consequentially also the risks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I would like to take a few steps back and talk about how you got into crypto. What is your background? What attracted you to blockchain? And was it something that you did on purpose or it just happened naturally?
Yeah, it's funny. I was actually talking to a friend about this. Actually, one of the other co-founders these days about it, because I'm a computer engineer. So that's my background. Before Hathor, I always worked as a software engineer. Even in Hathor, I started just programming. I'm one of the co-founders. We all have technical backgrounds, but just started programming. And later on, as kind of the business grows, you kind of take more responsibilities and you end up switching to a more management role. But we actually started Hathor because one of the other co-founders, who is also into technical, we all studied together in engineering school. He was studying blockchain technology and how we could scale, and that was back in 2017, 16, 17. And so he proposed this new architecture for blockchain technologies, which is what gave birth to Hathor. So he proposed his PhD thesis and called us up, me and the other co-founders, because we had worked together before. And okay, let's you guys want to do this. And prior to that, my only contact in crypto was just buying some coins, and that was back in 2016 was the first time I actually bought any crypto. Which
Would you buy Bitcoin?
Yeah, Bitcoin, Ethereum, and I had some other. I don't remember some altcoin, but I really don't remember because I sold it shortly after. But I bought it on Poloniex, I think that was the exchange that I used at the time. But I really didn't pay a lot of attention to the technology itself, being very honest. I just bought it, everyone was talking about it. And it was only when my friend called and wanted to start this project that I really, stopped and looked at the technology itself and how we could, how it was different. So, and it's funny that at the beginning, it was not something that I thought, this is a revolutionary technology and, we can change the world. So it's going to be something very huge. It was just, let's do it. It's going to be a fun project. We worked together before, so I thought it was going to be something very fun to do. But I never imagined that, it's been 6 years now, because we started back in August, actually, beginning of August 2018. So it was actually over 6 years now. And never thought 6 years later I would still be doing this, and with some success to some degree, let's say.
That's beautiful. So I'm guessing when you started looking into the technology and like the actual potential, you got some inspiration, right? Because there has to be some inspiration and an ultimate mission and vision and goal for the project itself, right? There's so many L1s, so many L2s, and I guess my question is, what inspired you to initiate Hathor, to initiate this project? Like, what is the real problem that you're trying to solve?
Yeah, I'd say that specifically with Hathor, we have the the problem is a set of the complexity. I mean, there are two, let's say, problems. First is the architecture, which allows us to have a higher TPS and also being decentralized, because nowadays there are already a lot of chains with high TPS, but you have to really look into how decentralized they are. A lot of them claim, I don't know how many tens of thousands of transactions per second. But when you look into it, you can only do that if you have just a few nodes and a very specific setup. So that's not real decentralization, at least not how, Bitcoin, Satoshi set the standard. So for us, it was about first, this having a higher TPS, which translates in lower fees, even when there's a bull market. So with the same decentralization parameters, let's say. So that was one thing, but the other was what I just talked about, the complexity of the blockchain, which also translates into costs at one point. Mm-hmm. But I think the most important part about this is the security aspect, because we see a lot of hacks and problems with crypto products, and if you look to them, it's hardly ever the underlying blockchain. There is a flaw. It's actually some flaw in, let's say, the smart contract. Someone that created that product that had a flaw, because a lot of people, they come with the mindset of the let's say traditional development processes into the blockchain, and the blockchain is a very different world. It's much more complex. You have to think about a distributed system, and you have to think about probabilities, because nothing is completely final, right? Because a transaction is never fully confirmed. Can even unconfirm a transaction from a month ago if you have a lot of resources. So it's a very different mindset you have to you have to use to program. So that leads to a lot of security problems. And what we're trying to do with Hathor is this, trying to have a simpler platform for developers, so they don't have to, think about all these complexities when coding. But as I said, this is kind of particular to Hathor, and what, at least when we started, also that was the more general crypto and blockchain, mission. Let's say it's just to enable the more decentralized applications, and to be honest, it's just something very experimental. It's like, what are people going to be able to do with this new technology, because this is something very different. We never had anything like that. Well, I mean, you have the internet, which is basically decentralized, and actually that's enabled a lot of innovation and amazing products and projects. And, ever since we had the internet, it's been amazing what people have come up with. If you think about, like, say, YouTube and all of the channels people created. So, and also a bit of like the inspiration was like, I wonder what people are going to be able to do when they have this, decentralized platform where they can code and create products, financial projects or non-financial projects. And so I think it was a bit of that, not that we had a clear vision what people were going to do, because I think it's impossible, right? But for us, it was just, let's give them like a nice platform that they can use to build, and I think there are going to be some amazing projects built on top of it.
So this is the inspiration that you got at the beginning, right? And like you say, you can't really know how it's going to go in the future. But now, how has it changed? Like, I'm guessing your vision has changed, and your product has also changed somewhat with it, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's been 6 years, and I think a lot has changed. What's interesting is that, 6 years ago, it wasn't thinkable that governments would be discussing this technology the way they are, and how much space this has on the news, like how much everyone's discussing this right now. Even the U.S. elections are heavily there's a heavy debate about it, and people are talking about not firing the SEC chair because they want a more friendly one and all that. So a lot has changed. I'd say that part of me, I still want to see, the amazing decentralized projects that people are going to create. And they are creating, and they're still going to be creating, because I think we're still, a long way into this journey. There's still a lot to do in terms of adoption and, things that people are going to be able to create with this technology. But definitely has changed. Governments discussing this. I think more enterprises using it as well. So nowadays, I think I'm from Brazil, and in Brazil, all the biggest enterprises and financial institutions are discussing how to use this technology. So I think it's it's hard to say that it's become a reality because you never know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. But if you compare it to 6 years ago, it's much more a reality than it was. And when we started Hathor, it was during a bear market, and back then, when you had a bear market, no one's talking about crypto or blockchain, which has completely changed. I don't know, maybe we are still in the middle of bear market, and at least for the past year in the bear market, and everyone's still talking about it. It was still very much in the news cycle and all that. So, and I think that really shows how the industry has changed a lot and how it became more relevant and even more mature. So it's yeah, definitely a lot of changes. But I at least for me personally, I still have this idea, this vision of I want to see more decentralized products and how they're going to impact their lives. But I think also it depends a lot on what your, let's say, personal economic views are. So I think it's a bit different for every person.
I mean, yeah, I totally agree. It's completely different. And it depends a lot in the country that you're in, right? So you're based in Brazil.
Yeah.
The project is really big in Brazil. You have a pretty important community in Brazil, correct?
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
So in a way, I was wondering, like, how is blockchain and crypto perceived in Brazil? Because I feel like Brazil is a really interesting place, and in somewhat it's insular, right? Because it's the only one Portuguese-speaking country in Latin America.
Yeah.
Well, at least the most important one, right?
Yeah.
In terms of economics. And that makes it a bit, whatever happens in Brazil, it is different to whatever happens in the rest of the continent. So what would you say is the, general public perception of blockchain, and what is the government perception of blockchain, specifically of the regulator? Like, what is happening there?
There's a lot happening there, but as you said, like the perception, I think, depends a lot on, I think, each country. It's funny, a while back, I mean, a long time ago, I think 2019, I was speaking to a friend in Germany about crypto, and why crypto was created and all the whole inflation and economic aspect of it. And I remember she saying like, but why? Because I think people from Germany never, well, maybe now after COVID, they've lived through some inflation, real inflation, but in Brazil and I think whole Latin American countries, we lived through inflation. Like even myself, I've lived after the, let's say, high inflation in Brazil, but still like 10-15% a year, it's usual for us. So I think that changes a lot how you perceive this kind of product, crypto, let's say. So yeah, in a way, it's an answer to, let's say, inflation. And I think like Venezuela and Argentina, other countries also plagued with economical problems. It's perceived positively as a way to escape, the government spendings and all that. So in this light, is very positive. I also think Brazil is a country where financial products are well accepted. So it's, if you compare at least Brazil and the US in terms of the financial system, sorry, not financial system, but the financial products are available. You have so many banks and so many apps that you can use, and it's very easy to send money across your friends and all that. So I think Brazil is we are used to experimenting new products in this sense and open to it. So it's very well accepted. And in terms of the more government, the government of Brazil, at least the central bank, it's actually pushing this initiative of the CBDC and the crypto plan, the blockchain, the technologies as a whole. So, yeah, it's very interesting to see how it's gonna play. We have a lot of let's say MVPs being built by the biggest financial institutions. Even the stock exchange there, they're building products. They even use Hathor for one. So I'd say it's very well accepted, but obviously the political scene impacts a lot in Brazil. There's a lot of changes and a lot of instabilities, and you never know what's going to happen. So yeah, things are going, I'd say very well for now, but you never know what's going to happen in a year from now, or even like 6 months from now. Maybe things are going to change and it's going to slow down, but I don't think it's going to completely come to a halt because, as I said already, a lot of the big financial institutions and big companies are experimenting with it market. Some of them have really large teams, so we have some banks with maybe 50, a team with 50 people, which like it's huge, right? So they're already investing a lot of money. So even if there are some other changes, it's hard that's going to to a complete halt, or at least like all of a sudden, if it stops, it's gonna take a while if there are any changes. But I'd say in general, yeah, it's pretty much a very positive sentiment. And I think token.com also has some
we have
influencers that you have a community there. So I imagine you perceive this as a very positive sentiment.
Yes, my perception is that people are really open to it, a lot more so than in other countries. Like the average person is willing to experiment and to try new things. They're a bit less cautious, so they have that.
I'm not sure
attitude.
It's a positive or a negative thing, right?
It really depends on your perception of things, right? Because everything is subjective in a way. But from a perspective of mass adoption, I think Brazil is definitely a country where it could happen faster than in other countries that sets the pace.
Yeah.
So that is really positive, of course. And, the fact that it's a huge country, that really also speaks on its own, right? Because then it's very different to have it's 200 million inhabitants, right? In Brazil, a bit over
220,
than that. Yeah. Than 220 million inhabitants versus 5 million, 20 million, that are in other economies.
Yeah, and it's already a lot, as you said. Even like I also lived in Portugal for a long time, and you have I think 11 million people living there, and so it's a completely different scale, right? If to have mass adoption in Portugal is one thing, and when you have it in Brazil, it's different because as you said, like it's a continental country and a lot of people. So even if you have like 10% of the population, it's already a huge thing, right? To using a certain product.
It's like entering China, right? Like if you got 0.00001% of China, you'd be, very well positioned already. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's where, your effort gives a better ROI for the project on its own. So I mean, I would love to keep talking about Brazil, but I think we should focus on your product, right? So I think there's a few points that I'd like to discuss about your particular technology. So tell me how you combine blockchain and DAG technology, and how does this hybrid model work?
Yeah, sure. As I said, the Hathor Network started from the PhD project from one of the co-founders, and so he proposes different architecture that. Back then, IOTA was a very popular project. I think it still is somewhat popular, but back then was really, really popular. And it was the first one, I think, to become popular with this DAG model, where you have just the transactions. You didn't have any blocks. You just have transactions confirming transactions. But it suffered from a lot of project problems, finality problems. They had to use like a coordinator, which was centralized. So it didn't solve all the problems. So our co-founder, he came up with this hybrid solution where you have actually the DAG, direct acyclic graph of transactions, where the transactions, they confirm themselves. A new transaction comes and it confirms two previous transactions. But you also have a chain of blocks, which can sound like weird because, usually the transactions are inside the blocks. But in our case, no, like the blocks are kind of empty and they just point to they point to the previous block. So you form the chain of blocks, the blockchain. But they also point to two previous transactions. And, these two transactions themselves, they are also pointing to other transactions. So you basically you propagate this confirmation. So when a block arrives, it's gonna confirm two transactions, and these transactions, they propagate these confirmations throughout the whole DAG of transactions in the past. So that's basically how you have this mixed architecture. And what's interesting is that in Bitcoin, let's say you have the block limit size. There's a whole debate of, if you should increase it or not. You have the other, Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash and, the other things that they started because they wanted to increase the block size. In Hathor's case, you don't have this block space limitation because, a block, it's empty. It only confirms two previous transactions. So, it doesn't matter if between two blocks you have non-transactions, you have one transaction, you have 100 transactions, you have 100,000 transactions. So, the block is just going to confirm how how many transactions I have before. I mean, obviously you do have limitations, physical limitations of bandwidth and latency and all that probably prevent you from having 2 billion transactions done in a second. But at least in terms of architecture, that's not something that's limiting us. And I think that's probably the biggest difference in this size, and as the technology advances, in terms of network and CPUs and memory and all that, we're also going to get scale because, as I said, you're going to be able to fit more, send many more transactions per second than in the past.
So in a way, does your scalability depend on like how the technology evolves in terms of like CPU power?
No, I mean, I think everyone is constrained by that, so everyone, but in the sense, what I mean is that in our case, we're not constrained by the architecture itself, as for instance, in Bitcoin's case, where in the protocol, you're saying, okay, you can only have, let's say, 1 megabyte blocks, and, a transaction is going to have at least, I don't know how many bytes. So you have this many transactions per block at most. So, the protocol itself dictates how many transactions, what's your upper limit. When say like in Hathor, you don't have this upper limit, and only the more hardware, physical limitations are going to play a role, which is true for all the projects,
And can you tell me a bit about your model of a fee-free transactions?
Yeah, so in most blockchains, usually you have a fee for 2 reasons. The first one is to prevent spam, so like to prevent just anyone sending 10,000 transactions a second and basically overloading the platform, which is kind of similar to a DOS attack, and also how to order the transactions within a block, because we're just talking about it, you have limited block space. So if you pay more, you usually are guaranteed to be included in the next block, and you have a faster transaction. In Hathor's case, since we don't have this block space limitation, we never felt it was really needed to have the transaction fee for ordering, the transactions within the block, because this is not that's not a thing. So you don't need the transaction fees for that. And also in terms of preventing spam, in Hathor, all transactions also they have some proof of work. We are proof of work chain, and we can talk a bit more about it later. But so we are proof of work chain. So before sending any transactions to the blockchain, you also have to do some mining. It's not something that's major, not like you need a miner for that or anything very hardcore. But you do need to have some mining, and if you want to span the network, you need just a bit of mining for a lot of transactions. That takes a lot of computation capabilities, and that would be more expensive. It's funny that this mechanism was actually first invented for email, to prevent spam on email. So before you sent an email, you would also do some computation, like some mining, and if you want to spam a lot of people, you had to mine a lot. And so actually this is something that was created for email, and then I think blockchain technology kind of grabbed that idea.
Took it,
yeah. So that's also what happens in Hathor, because so before sending a transaction, you need to mine. So we also don't have this problem of the spam. So we don't need the transaction fees for both of these aspects, which is usually why you do need a fee. And then I think the next question is, what about miners? Because you just said you are proof of work mine chain. Well, you do have the block reward in each block, and our model is similar to Ethereum's in the sense that we did have some halvings, but now we have constant emission. So we started with 64 HTR per block, then it's dropped to 32, then to 16, and now we're at 8 HTR per block, and that's going to continue forever. It's similar to Ethereum. It's not like Bitcoin where it's going to continue having until there are no more block rewards. In our case, you're always going to have the block rewards because the miners need to be rewarded, incentivized, and they don't have the transaction fees.
Okay, that's really interesting, actually. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say if it's, because I don't think you can say, this is the right answer, or it's economics and incentives, and I think it's a very complex topic, and maybe there would be better solutions or not, but it's very hard. At least that's the one we've been using, and so far I think it's been working very well, and that allows not to have transaction fees.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's about better or worse. It's just also about a matter of preference, right?
Yeah,
Of like, how do you feel like you're also as a miner, like you're incentivized? Like,
yeah,
is the L1, giving you what you actually
yeah.
need, no, for whatever you're using it. So that is basically, the main objective there. So when we talk about tokenization, right, is also one of your main objectives or your main characteristics. So why is it so easy or so user friendly to tokenize on your platform?
Yeah. So as I said, like we wanted to build something on Hathor that was easy for people to use and remove complexity. So back when we were creating the platform, 2018, I think this decision was actually 2019. We looked at the market and okay, what are people doing with the blockchain technology? And at that point, they were just basically doing tokenization. The ICOs, they were a bit past, but mainly people were doing tokenization and creating tokens for different stuff. And to be honest, I think up to today that's what people do mostly, right? I mean, obviously you do have DeFi, but the base of it is you need a token and then you're going to trade it. So we decided, okay, let's make it very easy for people to just, create a token and tokenize anything because that's what they need. Most of them, they don't need all the complexities of let's write a smart contract to create a token because in the end they just want to create a token. So we created this token standard directly on the protocol itself. It's different than needing to create a smart contract. It's actually on the protocol itself, so it's super easy and cheaper as well because you don't need to run a smart contract when you're sending a transaction or anything like that. So this enables us to be faster and cheaper, and also about the security problems that I said. Since it's directly on the protocol, you don't have the security considerations that you would have if you had to write a smart contract and maybe auditing it and all that. So it's directly on the protocol. It's easy. Anyone can do it straight from the wallet. So yeah, that was kind of our idea of how we can make, blockchain adoption easier because anyone creating a token can just, easily do it from their own wallet. And what was funny is that I think the first real use case that we had on the network, it happened without us even knowing about it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think the guy just sent us a few messages asking for some direction, but in the end, he didn't need any real support from
But
us.
that's a really good thing.
Yeah, and actually what it was in the northeast of Brazil. I forgot the state, but northeast of Brazil, a barbershop. They did their loyalty program using a token created on Hathor. And
I love this because at the end of the day, okay, these are a very technical subject that when people in the crypto industry hear them and listen to you, they understand it. But the reality is that you want real use cases for people. So that is the most important thing that we're doing here. At the end of the day, in the crypto industry overall, right, we want mainstream adoption. And this example that you just gave me is a guy in a barbershop, you said Northeast, right, in Brazil, just literally used your network to tokenize, you said some sort of membership.
Loyalty.
Yeah.
I think it's like if every 10 haircuts, you get a free one. And then, I think every time someone went there and got a haircut, they would get a token.
That's awesome.
And then, later they could, send back the tokens and get a free haircut. Yeah, it's...
And he didn't need much support from the team.
No, I mean, he sent us a few questions. I think we talked on, I don't remember if it was Telegram or Discord or something like that. Asked a few questions, but, he launched it and it was very funny. I remember we were watching I think he posted on his Instagram, the barbershop's Instagram, and it was very interesting. And I think up to at least 2 years ago, I actually have to look it up. I was checking, the blockchain, and I would follow the Explorer token page, and still saw some transactions on his token.
You just went there to get a haircut.
Yeah, I should go there actually and then see. I mean, I would have to pay for a haircut because I don't have any of the tokens, but it was interesting. And as I said, it's also about that thing of creating this platform and see what people are going to come up with.
That's a great example. So, which other use cases could you speak about from in your network?
I mean, I think in the more crypto use case, just I think NFT was a big thing. Maybe it's gonna come back, a big thing.
Do you think it's gonna come back?
I'm not sure. It's hard to say. I mean, but we actually had a meme coin created way back. I think 2021. It was very, very interesting because it's called Hathor. You know,
Hathor.
as
Like
for
cat.
Hathor, yeah, for cat,
Nice.
Hathor.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. And you know, the guys were doing the project actually approached me and asked, "Can you do the mint? You know, the initial mint." So we did like a minting ceremony back in 2021, and I got to mint it and send it to their wallets. But it was very interesting. And at the time, meme coins were still not as popular as they are right now. But the project still exists and has a very active community. Which is very interesting, but also on the more corporate space, we also have some interesting projects in Brazil, some related to betting platforms, and also actually a Web3 bank where they serve some betting clients. And I think the most, let's say, relevant and famous one we have is an STO platform. So it's actually a project that's regulated by the Brazilian authorities, the Brazilian SEC, where they issue financial instruments on the blockchain. I was going to say directly on the blockchain, but that's not true because actually it's a replica of the real financial instrument. So there is a financial instrument, they actually tokenize it, and they replicate all the transaction also on the blockchain. So you still have the traditional instrument and you have the one that's replicated, and it's basically a sandbox where they're testing, okay, could we move this, or at least remove some of the operations that we do here in the traditional world, let's say, and move them to the blockchain. And we had some, I think it's private debt actually, and some of the biggest banks in Brazil, they issue some assets there. I think we have over $40 million tokenized in this project.
That's really interesting. And for you, Osa, because this is really difficult to really define or understand, but I guess you can see trends. Where do you see Hathor evolving more, as in like in a community or your use cases? More on a corporate side of things, or more like the barbershop side of things?
That's a $1 million question, right? I think in the future, maybe 10 years from now, I think real volume is going to be with the more traditional corporate, because in the end, people are not going to understand they're using blockchain the same way that most people don't understand cryptography, but they use every day. We're just, you send a message on WhatsApp and you're using cryptography. You're using a whole lot of technologies that you don't have any idea that you're using. And I think that in the end, crypto is going to evolve into that, or at least that's how I see that it's going to have mass adoption. Because if you really depend on people understanding these technologies, I really don't think it's going to happen. So I think, in the long term, I think the corporate use cases, they're going to have the real volume. But at least for the short term, middle term, even midterm, even, it's going to be maybe the more Web3 native, the Uniswaps of life, Aave and stuff like this, because for now, the average user, that's not the average user, but the retail user, that's what they've been doing, and the companies and the governments, they're still experimenting with it, and that's a very, very long process. Because if you talk about governments, they really need to make sure that things are okay before they can really adopt the technology or change their whole technology database, right? So I think this is a long, long process, and with blockchain being such a new technology, still it's going to take a while. I mean, if you talk about like the internet as well, the internet itself actually was born like in I think late 60s, early 70s, and that was only 20 years later that we had the web. And
it actually exploded. No?
Yeah. So it takes a while for technology to mature and to be, being able to use it. Even today, it's not, I wouldn't say it's, you still have a lot of government processes that are not online. I mean, at least in Brazil, a lot of processes you still have to go to
an office.
To an office and do some stuff. And sign and go to a notary. So it takes a long time.
Yeah, they have to check your signature, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know if that happens in Brazil. I'm from Mexico, but in Mexico, it's always like, Miss, your signature is not exactly the same. And you're like, oh my God, this could be solved with blockchain. But
yeah, so I think it takes a long time, and blockchain technology, even though we're now 15 years since Bitcoin has been launched, it's still very
Still very early.
yeah, very early. So I think it's going to take a while before they really gain mass adoption, at least on the more enterprise and government side.
So what would you say that we actually need for mass adoption? Because you said if it's going to, depend on people actually understanding or studying the technology, that's not going to happen, and I agree with you, right? I mean, people just don't have the time or the resources or simply don't want to. So what would you say are the factors that we're missing for mass adoption?
Well, I mean, I think people have to understand to a degree, right, to feel comfortable. And I've heard Mel from Token.com speaking about, the mission of Token.com, about, informing people. And I think that's an ingredient needed for it. You already have a lot of information channels about in crypto, but it's still not. I mean, if you compare it to the traditional market, we have so many. I'd say it's something that's already solved, let's say, in the traditional markets, vehicles of information about the financial markets. You can discuss, okay, maybe you need some better ones or not, but it's basically solved. But I think in crypto, it's also something that's still not solved. And, there are new projects always coming up as Token.com to try to solve it. So I think, information and teaching people definitely is an ingredient, even though I don't think they're going to come to that, level of details, of understanding. The same way as just talking on how people, they understand the basis of cryptography, what cryptography is, and if they see a lock, they are happy. But I think in the end, it's just a matter of what value you are giving to the end user. If there's a value, people are going to use it. If there's not, they're not going to use it. And when I say about value, it encompasses all of the aspects of the product, because it may be amazing and allow you to do amazing stuff, but if it's not easy to use, I mean, if there are a lot of security risks, it kind of basically cancels any kind of value that this product can give you. So if you talk about the DEX's experience that you have, I mean, it's amazing that you can trade in a decentralized exchange, but all the risks that you have and the understanding that you need if you want to make a safe trading, I think that drives away
a lot of users.
A lot of users.
Even users that understand it, right? Because you understand the risks.
Sometimes even more. Sometimes even more. And that's funny. I was talking to one of the people in the company this day, and he was like, "Yeah, but if you want to launch a token nowadays, it's you have to get someone to write a smart contract. But how do you know that a person hasn't put a backdoor into it and can sue your token?" It's like, I don't think most people think about this. It's not like a risk that they have it mapped. So like in this case, kind of ignorance is a blast, or no, because they can have their rug pull.
I personally think that like for mass adoption or for, there's a few issues the crypto industry needs to solve. One is what we're solving at token.com, which is, like information and people kind of understanding what it is. And secondly, it's one that you guys are solving, which is like ease of use, right? Making it simple to use for everyone, not only for the end users, but also for developers. And thirdly is security. So my question here, and it's like, what are the main security points that you think we should all solve as an industry? Because I think security is a huge part of for us to be taken seriously, basically. In the mainstream world. Yeah,
definitely. It's never good for the whole industry when you have news that, there's a $200 million hack that happened, because, I mean, even though we can say, it's a competitor, so it's kind of good for my product, but I think as an industry, it just set us back. Even though that happens very frequently in the traditional markets, it's just
you don't hear about it.
Yeah, you don't hear about it because it's a very opaque and I mean, since it's centralized, you control the information as well. So if a bank is hacked, which happens daily, people don't hear about it.
You won't say anything.
Yeah, and in the blockchain space, when it happens, everyone sees it.
It's transparent.
Yeah, because it's transparent and it's very easy to audit. But yeah, definitely the security is a big problem. As I was saying, in Hathor, when we say about making it easier to use, it's not just about, let's say, the UX of it, but also the integration part, which reduces the complexity should the developers creating the product. So you have let's say, a smaller surface of attack, or you have less possible mistakes that you can make, when developing your project. But yeah, in that sense, I think also another very big point there is the custody issue and how to solve that, because crypto resolves about, your keys, your coins. But I don't think most people are prepared for that.
When you mean that people are not prepared for that, in the sense of understanding it or about responsibility? Because I feel like
For both.
in a way it's about self-responsibility,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And I'm not sure even if people want that responsibility.
That's the thing, right?
Yeah, for them, maybe it's easier to just
Blame it on someone else.
Yeah, and if there's a problem, they can have a lawsuit and, get their money back or anything like that, or they're protected by consumer laws or something. But I think it's also about a change of behavior, and it's going to take time, because I think, the older generation maybe is not used
Mindset.
to that, but I think the newer generation, they're going to come more and more growing accustomed to that, so they can, take more responsibility for their funds, hopefully, let's say.
Their financial freedom.
Yeah, their financial freedom. And that comes with responsibility. Let's say the responsibility of handling your
keys, your everything.
Which still, I think our responsibility as builders in the space is making it easier for them, because even today, it's still not that simple, right?
It's not that simple and not that safe yet. And that is crazy. So, because at the end of the day, you'll hear about like phishing links or like things that happen here and there. And you have people that are super experienced managing their own funds and experiencing crypto, right?
Well, yeah,
and they fall for that. So what's going to happen to the average Joe?
Yeah. I mean, even then there is kind of let's say a safe way to do it, just have it on hardware wallets, and basically if it's a hardware wallet, okay, you're safe, but even then, the experience is not that easy.
Exactly.
And then when you want to make a transaction with this, if it's a hardware wallet, then it's a bit harder. And then when you come like this point of contact of, sending a transaction, all that, and that's when you have the problems. Even then, even when you're using a hardware wallet, you have so many possible ways of doing. If your browser is displaying you the wrong destination address, you're not gonna know, right?
But it's also about the trust of the hardware wallet maker.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's huge as well.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not sure you're going to come to the point where it's completely trustless, because I'm not sure if it's even how the world works, right?
How realistic is it, right?
Yeah. I mean, in the end, even on real world, you have to trust a few people at least, or a few. So I'm not sure in the end it's going to come to 100% trustless, and there's nothing you're going to be trusting. Well, maybe we can come to that, but I think the UX would be just so terrible that would be useless, to be honest.
Yeah, I completely agree. And in a way, what you're thinking about the mindset change, right? It's people taking responsibility for their own, funds, financial freedom, etc. But also, like, how is this going to happen? Because in a way, I feel like the way that the world is moving is that we're going to have basically almost like two parallel realities living in the same world, where people are going to be, more involved and more responsible for their own financial freedom in whatever shape or form they choose to. And there will be people that simply will not, right? And it is about like newer generations, but it's also about mindset, right? So whoever gets on this boat and on this train will be there, but whoever doesn't won't. And at the end of the day, the entry point will be even more difficult, because it's just simply going to be more expensive to enter into alt currencies or crypto, right? So
yeah, I think even if you have this true universe, as you said, it should be a matter of personal choice. If you want to, have everything handled by someone else, like by a trusted third party, or I'll handle it myself, and I have more responsibilities, but I'll probably have more freedom to do whatever I want with it. And in the end, as I said, it depends on what are the benefits. By handling everything yourself, do you get better returns? Do you get we're talking about how the country where you live, how your background shapes us. In Brazil, back in the early 90s, we had a president, basically, he confiscated everyone's life savings. So I mean, that would never happen if you were handling like
Yeah.
if you had something like was self custodial. And even though we may seem, I mean, harder that
To
this is not gonna
manage.
happen
Yeah.
again. I mean, it's happened recently like in Canada. I think like the truckers protests where they had their funds blocked. So it happens from time to time, and I guess is are the incentives worth this increased responsibility, because it is it's more responsibility, a bit more work, you know, but we have to see if the rewards are going to be worth that.
Yeah. I mean, like, at the end of the day, like, given the state of the world, I wouldn't put it past anything that could happen again. And that is simply a reality. It's horrible to say, but it is, right? So it's about who you put your who and where you put your trust. And, you know, this is maybe the big ethos of crypto and of blockchain. But, you know, I'm going to go back to Hathor for a second. You're introducing a new feature in your product, which are nanocontracts. So can you tell me a bit more about them, how they're going to work, and how do they compare to like other similar offerings?
Yeah, sure. Like very much in line what we're, you know, our ethos, you know, about making blockchain easier to use and remove complexities. You know, nano contracts are our smart contracting platform, and they're called nano contracts because I'd say they are reduced, simplified version of the smart contracts. Again, we see I mean, smart contracts are great. They're amazing. You know, I think Ethereum is amazing. A lot of people, especially earlier in Hathor's life, Hathor is an Ethereum killer. I'm like, that's not what we are. You know, I think Ethereum is great. I love it. I think it's an amazing product. But I mean, there are some problems, and there's a space that we can fill. So we think that nano contracts, there's this easier to use, simplified smart contracting platform where you have less risks. You know, in the end of the day, for us, is about having, you know, less risks and the complexity. So if you want to build your decentralized application by using smart contracts, you know, in Hathor, it's going to be easier. It's on Python, which is a very user-friendly language. You have a lot of developers worldwide using it already. They know how to write Python code, and we're trying to make it as easy as possible for anyone to just be able to write code where you don't have
Transition as well, no?
yeah, transition, but you know, without having to think about all those things that I was talking about. You know, it's a blockchain, it's a distributed system. You know, you have to think about finality, and maybe the transaction is reversed. So we're trying to, you know, remove as much of this complexities as possible for the let's say average user. In this case, the average user being the developers, the people who are building products on top of it. So we often talk about Pareto's law, you know, 20-80, and we see that like maybe 80% of the DeFi, well, not just DeFi, but the projects using smart contracts, they use maybe 20% of the features of smart contracts. As like, for example, tokens, you have just the ERC20 tokens, and I don't know, 90% of the tokens are ERC20, and so we're trying to get like this 20% of the features that we see as the most used ones, and have them very native and easy to use in Hathor platform. And we understand that we're not going to be able to embrace, let's say, maybe support all of the use cases, and that's fine, you know. And that's why we see that there's room for more than just one chain, and you know, you have bridges and you have other ways to collaborate with other chains. So, but we want to have this core features that's very easy to use, and really removes away the complexity for the developers who are, you know, writing their smart contract. So yeah, it's something that we're in testnet right now. So it's going to be very interesting to see what people are going to come up with.
Okay, so I'm already FOMOing about it. That's really, really cool. And I mean, I guess you'll let us know about like your launch plans and everything, so we can all announce it and support you guys with this.
On our token.com page.
Yeah, of course. And in your profile, I'll be like, of course, that's where it's supposed to be. And I wanted to talk about potentially about like the ultimate goal of Hathor. Like, where do you see Hathor and its particular project potentially changing the world, right? In let's say in the next 10 years.
Yeah, I think a lot for me, as I said, is about building decentralized applications, because in the end, I think they're going to be better for the end user. I mean, even if it's not fully decentralized, let's say, and you're going to have still some intermediaries in there, but if we can migrate towards that, I think the end user is going to benefit from it. Maybe not just fees, it depends a lot. Maybe lower fees or maybe less risks. Less risks, I mean that you have less people in the chain there can, go bankrupt and their money is lost. So I think that overall, migrating towards a more decentralized world, let's say, is it's going to be a net benefit for everyone. So I think that for Hathor, if you can enable this, by presenting a easier to use platform that's going to remove the risk, a lot of the risk complexities, and even the time to market for people building these products, it's I think that would be the end goal. But yeah, removing the intermediaries and having a more decentralized world would be the end goal. I'm not sure if we're going to be 100% decentralized, to be honest, but as much as we can, being very realistic. And as we're talking, it's a process, right? We're going to start with, let's say, maybe it's only 2% decentralized, and it's going to become 10% decentralized, and then slowly we're moving away towards a more decentralized way of products.
And one more thing, tell me about your token.
Our token, yeah, HCR. It's the native token for Hathor Network. Again, was launched back when we launched the mainnet. And if you want to use our features, let's say, tokenization and upcoming nanocontracts, that's it's a utility token that you need for accessing those features. So even tokenization, you don't have any fees. So like, oh, why are you using the token? But when you create your own token on Hathor, you have to make a deposit on HCR. So like it's a 1% deposit, and it's a deposit because you get it back if you burn your tokens, if you destroy them. So with Nanocontracts also coming, HCR also has a role there as a utility token. So that's the end goal for it.
Amazing. And Jan, is there anything else that you'd like to add?
So I'm very excited. I mean, it's been, let's say, a long winter, but as I said, I think this time has been different because people are much more active and talking much more about it. And we're very excited about the next few months or even the next few years. With Nanocontracts, we're really, really excited. Already have people working on some very interesting projects using this technology, even though it's on testnet. So when we launch it on mainnet, we're already going to have some very, very interesting products running on the network. And apart from that, just thank token.com for this space. And let's build. Anyone who's interested in building anything, just get in contact with us, and we would be very happy to support you.
So how should people get in contact with you? Like, do you have any socials that they should follow?
Yeah, definitely. On our website, hathor.network, we have the community section where you have all the links to our socials, our Discord, our Telegram, our Twitter. So, you can get in contact with us with any of those means that we're going to answer.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Jan. This is Jan Martins from Hathor Network for the Pump Fiction podcast produced by token.com.